All right. I think we have a quorum, ladies and gentlemen. And look, I'm excited about this session, so I'm going to kick it off because I want to hear what Stephen, Peter and Darren have to say. Now, again, I have to pay tribute to Mayor Luke Smith for his vision in understanding the diversity and complexity of the innovation space and his ability to bring together all the separate players into this one conference. Too often it's just about technology and the startups, but as I said earlier, Mayor Luke Smith has brought us educators, he's brought us innovators, he's brought us international guests, he's brought us the artistic and creative sector, and right with us now, one of the key pillars of creating an innovative city, community, region, lays with the people on the stage with us now. They're our planning and development friends. And I'd like to introduce you to Stephen Harrison, the Urban Development Institute of Institute of Australia from Queensland. Stephen, welcome. Peter Cummins from Land Lease. And Darren McLean from the Pacific Group. Thank you very much. Let's try that again. Woo! Yeah. All right, let's plan and develop. Okay, so colleagues, to start off with an easy one, just to make this real for people and to give an example of what's happening in your sector, perhaps could you just tell us very briefly about something innovative in your sector that you're doing or something that you're impressed with? It can either be real or a principle, but we'd very much like to hear about something tangible that sets you apart and is innovative.
Quickly, two things, and thanks for the love, everyone. So we'll hopefully get through this in half an hour. It is a topic we can talk about for a long time because it is a really fertile space. It's a space, and particularly when we talk about Logan, because a lot of the heavy lifting for new greenfield development, for new innovation, and the opportunities for incorporating a lot of that is in Logan. So just quickly, South East Queensland Regional Plan, 60-40 split, infill, greenfield. 51% of that 40% in the next 30 to 40 years is going to be in Logan. So the opportunity is there to actually master plan communities, to start to incorporate innovation, to start to get into some of these great initiatives and partner up and really be aspirational for Logan. So I think that's quite exciting. So at a UDI level, with that hat on, firstly I'll say we've got a research foundation. So we've got an industry leaders research group. What that's doing is engaging with the market and talking to mums and dads, to those who work within the industry as to what their challenges are, what they'd like to see, what are their key objectives, not only for purchasing a house or working within industry, but what makes them tick. Now that's important because it gives us real hard facts, empirical evidence of what people want, whether it's a particular product, it's something that you incorporate into your house or your dwelling, or it's where they want to live or how they want to get to where they want to live. So that's the first thing. And I think these two gents will start to talk about the second point, which is starting to do that in tangible ways, in communities, in new developments. And some of what we'll talk about in the next half an hour relates to two big greenfield areas in particular, but there's some other general topics we can talk about. So probably enough for me.
Thanks, Sue. Re-innovation. So I heard some talk before about innovation framework and how it's affecting corporate culture. So certainly within Land Lease, that's a big push at the moment, and there's an innovation framework within our business. So that's innovative and a change in itself, which is fantastic. Certainly in the greenfield master plan community space, it may not sound innovative, but partnering with really great local organisations and people is so critical and often overlooked. So at Yarrabulba, there's over 30 groups active working with us at the moment, and they're people that are excellent in their space, particularly social enterprises. So I think the early engagement with those organisations is critical. They're the ones that actually make the difference and deliver stuff. It's early days yet, but that's been a great shift that I've seen.
Thanks. And Darren?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think the exciting thing about this innovation that's coming into smart cities is the efficiencies that developers can reap from having smart systems in place, and that runs across so many parts of a property development. But essentially it comes down to being able to monitor and react to situations a lot faster than you otherwise would. In our particular case, on the Flinders project, we'll be implementing systems to monitor water quality, utilities, metering, obviously security, and emergency response systems. So being a fairly practical breed of people, property developers and engineers and builders are looking for just that efficiency that, you know, is tangible and essentially, you know, builds on the bottom line.
Thank you, colleagues. One of the critical issues that I continue to raise at this forum is the issue of barriers. And having worked in state and local government for more than 15 years, there are more barriers than anywhere in the interface between developers, the community, and local government in particular. There's obviously state legislation and regulation that governs this space as well. Can I just ask the question, what do you think some of the big constraints or barriers in this space to allowing you to do new and innovative things? As I said, I can't say that. Still can't say it. It's day 2. Can't say it. Start. Innovation. More innovation in this space. And how might we address it? I'm always going to ask that question. What's the barrier and how might we address that? Stephen, could I start with you again, sir?
Look, the barrier is certainly in a lot of the policies and the documentations, existing standards and regulations, and we can go on and on. Now, you do have to have them, but I think the reality is that change is hard. Innovation is change. And that's where I think it's really about communication, about ongoing communication, engaging with all stakeholders, making sure that they're aware of what it is and are part of the journey and have ownership. But also, certainly I think that if you continue to go down that path, there's great rewards. So yes, it is difficult and probably the most difficult space in local and state government because of all those policies and restrictions, because you do have to have things built and developed in a certain way. But what I do know is this, is that the moment you stop innovating, whether you're a business, a person or a city, is the moment you fall behind your competitors. And whether we're a city, a person or a business, we're all in competition. So I think that's why it's important to start to think in that way and act in that way. And to be honest, if we're all aligned in thinking, and that to me is the community, developers and also government, we can make those things happen. But it's only when we're aligned that we can make it happen in an effective way. It does take time. What's that shampoo ad? It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. So it's a bit like that. And I think that's where you can break down those barriers. Changing process and policy is hard, but it's got to be innovation, and we've got to continue to innovate.
Fantastic answer.
Yeah, no, Steve,
Peter.
couldn't agree more. I mean, it's a massive change management exercise, isn't it? And certainly from a developer perspective, it's the hard infrastructure things that are often really tangible examples of where it is tough to innovate. That could be things like streetlights, roads, parks, they're assets that ultimately are owned and managed and loved by councils. And so they're very consistent around, well, how we don't give us something that's going to be pie in the sky, something that has to work with us long term. So I know we're going to get onto smart cities soon, which is really something I'm very passionate about. So the key to unlocking it is having both parties, all parties willing to work together. But I really love the idea of the living lab, which is kind of a trend term at the moment you hear around in smart cities. But it's great because it gets people engaged in saying, okay, we can pilot something together, let's test it together, let's prove it together, and then let's implement it long term together if it works. And I think that kind of it's a bit of a safe zone really for people to be able to work together. And it's the old partnership thing that gets thrown out there so often, but it's not always delivered on. But I think that's the really exciting thing around smart city. A smart city is livable, workable, sustainable. That's the starting point. And as you said, Steve, unless you're in that space, you're left behind. It's a competitive necessity this day. So I think they're the tension points, but there is a way to overcome it, and it's through this kind of partnership and piloting and trialling together.
And Darren, your thoughts on barriers and how we might
definitely.
address them?
Definitely the policy and guidelines are, chasing their tail to try to keep up, and that's the challenge. Is the technology is moving ahead so fast, and there are so many great ideas to consider. In that sense, I think it's really important for the stakeholders, private and public, to agree on the principles of what this policy needs to address and allow or acknowledge that it is going to change. So it can't be a prescriptive document in terms of, the performance specification of something. It needs to outline the principles of what you're trying to achieve, and as long as the developers can demonstrate that, then you can comply and move forward.
Yeah, really interesting. I just had a conversation over morning tea about the very same idea with regard to government procurement. And we're so scared as government of a risk, we're so scared of government of failure, that we end up specifying things to hell and high water. and that ends up causing a lot of pain, and it certainly limits innovation. So, Stephen and Peter, you mentioned smart cities, and likewise, it's a passion of mine. That's what I worked on in ACT Government for 5 years, and my Church of Fellowship was about that. Tell me, what can your industry do to lead the way in creating smart cities and smart communities and smart regions? And how can, I guess, government support your leadership, either in partnership or in collaboration? Stephen.
We're great believers in looking at great case studies throughout the world or throughout Australia. So invariably, you're not the first person to invent the wheel. And so there's great examples in small scenarios of something that's really innovative that you can start to upscale and potentially implement at a community or a city level. Unfortunately, though, you sometimes burdened by the fact that you're the first mouse, and what happens to the first mouse? It's normally the second mouse that gets the cheese. So you've got to make sure that, again, you're on that journey, you're taking the understanding of all stakeholders and incorporating some great case studies that have worked really well, and remembering that each location is unique, but taking the best bits that you've seen in case studies throughout the world or throughout Australia and incorporating them in the project you're working on. And there's lots of opportunity to do that. And I mentioned before about having to continually innovate, and we do. In our industry, we have to, because I will say consumers are smarter, they're more savvy, and they can look at things at their fingertips, and in their living room, the comfort of their living room, they can check out, okay, who's got what on offer? What are they providing? Are they providing a piece of land, or are they providing a community, a lifestyle, something that benefits us not just to live in, but also to recreate, to enjoy our social and community infrastructure and commercial infrastructure and so forth. So I think it's more about whole life cycle and all of those facilities rather than just providing a piece of dirt. You have to provide more. You have to create points of difference, and a lot of that relates to innovation.
From a smart community, smart city perspective, to me it's around connectivity. So there's a couple of spheres of influence here. So one, what can the developer and the development community do within its remit? What can partnerships between the developer and council and other entities do and deliver? And then the third part is around the private sector and just innovation, and to put some sense to what I'm saying. In the first sphere, and what developers can do is really around that connectivity issues, and we're talking about digital connectivity here, so whether it's the fibre in the ground, the Wi-Fi, the mobile coverage, those three elements are all really important and really complementary to being connected. I know we're all fascinated by the drones delivering pizzas and drones delivering Amazon stuff. I mean, that's great, it gets the headline, but really unless you've got foundation connectivity...
Sorry, did you say that's a drone delivering pizza?
Well... What would you like?
Is there a drone?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I got distracted.
These are the aspirational things, Brooke. You've got to think big. Okay, so, but they're the things that are the headline grabbers. What's not really exciting is someone getting, all up in arms and excited about pit and pipe. Wow, we delivered great conduit. But that's a really, really fundamentally important thing that we in the development community can do and deliver.
Can I just ask on that one in particular? One of the things that I'm seeing around Australia is that we all understand that we need to get good fibre into a new suburb, but what ends up happening is the infrastructure goes in, but the outcomes in terms of service are different because there's a tension between the wholesaler and retailer. Do developers have a role to play in ensuring that what goes in as infrastructure leads to good performance outcomes for citizens?
Well,
and is there
a yes or no answer to that? Did you want to go first, Steve?
I know that's a really tough question.
After you.
I know that's a tough
I
question. I know that's a tough question.
I can talk about anything really, but
please do.
look, in that space, just think about this. So one of the projects I worked on back in 2004 was the first project anywhere in the country that was rolling out fibre to the premises for every lot within the project. Now, haven't we come a long way? NBN... okay, there's pros and cons, but it's going throughout the country. It's going to provide the backbone for technology and future-proofing for all our communities, hopefully, at some stage. So I think that's really important, because if we're building greenfield developments, new communities, we need to future-proof that, because you've just seen, around the corner, the young fellow there, 5-year-old I think he is, and he's plugging away and working at an iPhone. Generations past wouldn't have been able to operate an iPhone, but that's the future. So we've got to provide that future-proofing within our new communities to enable that technology and the fundamental connectivity to be able to occur.
I could probably second that, because I was working on the Emerald Lakes project at Carrara from 2000 to 2008. We had a great marketing strategy to implement Telstra's FTTP, fibre to the premises. And I happen to live at Emerald Lakes today, and really it's a failure because the fibre that I have connected to my home doesn't give me the fastest speed that's available. It's a Telstra Velocity product. It's very average. And, in that case, kind of brings us back to the original question, which is what can developers do? And what they can do is make sure the first question they ask is how is this going to benefit the end user? Not how are we going to get there or what are we going to do, but what's the actual tangible benefit that will be derived from this? We've probably learnt a lot over the last decade in terms of, what fibre to the premises and fibre optics can achieve. And I think the solution to that, or a possible solution, is to try to encourage everything to be open platform and open architecture. So on the Flinders project, we're currently dealing with NBN Co on bringing the data and phone into Flinders, but it's a closed platform. We can't do anything else we want to do on the backbone of NBN Co because they're a closed group, which is unfortunate because it's probably going to result in us having to run a completely separate set of fibre around the project when we know that one conduit of fibre has more than enough bandwidth to support what everyone wants to do for so many years to come. So open platform, open architecture is probably what we should be trying to enforce.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and this is the very real perverse outcomes that are happening every single day across Australia because of some of those constraints that are involved with the NBN Co. So experiencing that now down south as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an issue that touches us at all. So I'm going to throw this open to the audience because I could keep asking questions and I do love how efficient they are at answering. Certainly some engineering training in this area. Can I ask for questions from the audience, please? Because our panellists are ready and raring to go and answering with all speed and haste, and I love it. Tony, of course, and I'll come to you, sir, and then down to you.
I have a general question to...
Could we grab the microphone? Thank you so much, Georgie.
Just a general question to the panel about job creation strategies in your greenfield communities. Are you doing something in that space?
I think for some of us, for each of the three of us, we're bound to. We have a requirement to create a certain number of jobs and a certain amount of or percentage of self-containment. But it is difficult. It is really difficult. And you know what? You've really got to work at it all the time. And you've got to try and continue to improve because it's not something that's going to all of a sudden be created. But a nearby example, Springfield, and what they've been able to achieve there in terms of tens and thousands of jobs, or maybe, I don't know the exact number, but there's thousands and thousands of jobs there. That have been created on the back of someone's vision to try and ensure that there was technology, to ensure that there was diversity, to ensure that there was a lot of self-containment. Now there's still a ways to go, and that's a case study, I guess, a relatively local one that we all look at. We look further afield at places like Googong or Rouse Hill or others throughout the country to Lightsview in South Australia. Ellenbrook in Western Australia, to look at opportunities to create jobs, but it's not easy and you've got to do it from grassroots up. So home-based business, and again, technology helps that because not everyone can do a home-based business without the technology. So home-based business, the transition to schools, maybe starting with schools and houses to a full school at some stage. So you do have to try and catalyse it though, and it is something that as a developer, you need to fund. You need to seed fund up front to try and get it to grow. And you've probably got some good examples at Yarrabilba and others, Pete, where in that space of trying to create the jobs. And
yeah, that's right. So certainly by the act of developing, you're creating employment. So with Yarrabilba, there's around 1,500 construction jobs per year because of the development there. And by the time, if you're familiar with Precinct 1 or District Centre 1, there'll be around 800 full-time jobs. But in addition to that, there are some very tangible things that you can actually do. So based on it's the skilling and employment model. So we have a facility at Yarrabilba called the Exchange. The Exchange is a facility that it's really an aggregation point for a whole bunch of really great organisations, whether they be social enterprise, private organisations, so Access Community Services, Gold Coast School of Construction, your town, work with us there. And that's really a centre that's looking at local jobs for local people. So it's whether you're unemployed, underemployed, employed and looking for something else, it's a place that you can go and connect with people. And that opened in December, mid-December, which is, not the greatest time to open that kind of shop. But by now they've already helped place 110 locals into real-term employment, sometimes in Yarrabulba, sometimes in the surrounding area, but it's all good stuff. So there's some very tangible things that we've done to work with others to connect people and get people into jobs. And then the other bigger part is, of course, the employment that comes with the fact that you're developing.
And just to further that, at the Flinders project, which is part of the Greater Flagstone area, we are setting a benchmark for 60% self-containment as opposed to the current 30% that's being achieved in Logan as a local government area. So 60% is the benchmark we're aiming for, and there's already been a couple of ideas mentioned in terms of encouraging home-based business. One other initiative that we have right from the first community building, the first sales centre, is to put in a shared office space. So anybody can walk in, utilise that shared office in our commercial model. There's no cost for that, a cost to the developer but no cost to the user, so that it encourages people just to open up their laptops and start work right there with all of the facilities that they would expect.
So I'm impressed by the level of innovation maturity. It's fantastic. It's really heartening. Yes, sir, I know you had a question. Thank you.
I just wanted to expand on the answers to some of those questions. Development industry of subdivisions has been plodding along the same way for centuries. You guys are looking after greenfield developments that you're going to be around for 30 years. The aspirations of 60% self-sufficiency are fantastic, but every house you sell adds to the congestion from day one. The challenge is, have you considered flipping that upside down, building offices, building the shopping centres, building the community facilities up front? Now that means the developer has to find solutions for that. Building industrial type properties or commercial type properties up front, where the people are able to get some dispensation on the purchase of that land for the 5 or 6 years that it takes to actually generate the income for those businesses. If you're actually able to do that, I think your goal of 60% might be achievable. The problem is that from day one, most of these people need 2 cars because they're so far from anywhere, and it just adds to congestion. So is there a thought about how you could actually turn your model completely upside down, really get some innovation in there, and deliver subdivisions that will not add to the burden, but actually, help us solve the burden?
Well, there's a few points in there. I'm happy to have a crack at each of them. Pete, if you want me to start. So there's a few things in there. So Logan, I think if you look at it, what surrounds Logan traditionally is a lot of blue-collar employment. And that's why I like we're here today talking about innovation, because I think that's where the space is. That's where the fertile ground is in the opportunity for white-collar employment, is getting the brightest minds from Australia or around the world here to mentor, mentee those that can really lift the intellectual capacity of the city, but also the region. So I think the opportunity with Ebenezer, Swanbank, Park Ridge, Brompton we're talking about, have talked about for a long time, a lot of blue-collar jobs, but not a lot of white-collar jobs. And I think that's where there's an opportunity in this space, in this city, in this space. So that's where I think, number one, innovation. Number two, look, there's a lot of models that developers investigate in terms of seeding or subsidising upfront investment in particular job creation, particular fields, or something that might be missing. I think it's important that developers engage with councils and other authorities to say, okay, gap analysis, what have you got? You've got 10 of them, 5 of them, you haven't got one of those. Okay, would that work? Would that be something that would fit in the city? And I think that's where the space that we're working in, a lot of what we're doing is trying to do that and identify that, and then it's about putting money towards that and catalysing it by bringing it forward in the development cycle. So instead of traditionally putting it at year 7 or year 10, it might be at year 2 or year 3, but it might be a smaller model. It might be a neighbourhood centre that's got an anchor and a six-pack instead of a neighbourhood centre that's got 30 shops, and then you just build on that. But you have the master planning in place, so you've got that footprint, and then you just add to it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a great question, and it's a real challenge because you're saying follow a traditional model and build it once the demand's proven. Often the service is delivered too late. Flip it on the other head, which would be great. We go, right, let's just capitalise it and let's build the whole thing. And the challenge is the ghost town where businesses fail and then the developer goes broke. So you think, okay, that's the other end. How do you fit that middle ground? And it's always about how do you get the service there as early as possible, because we know that's really important for the community as well. The pop-up movement's been, going for a while now, and it's certainly promised a lot. But I think there's some real answers in that too. And there's a role that we as a developer can play in providing interim spaces to help businesses start up in a tangible way. The exchange at Yarrabilba is a really good example of that. It's about giving organisations, or the work from home that you're talking about, or work from the co-working facility. It's about how can we provide a leg up? It'd be great to go to the other model, like where we say let's just build a thing, but then it's always that challenge about reputation, underactivating it and getting it to commercially stack. So I think we're all kind of conscious about how do you get the service there earlier. I think there's a lot happening in that space. We're certainly piloting a few different things at Yarrabilba and our other projects around the country as well. Hear what you're saying. I think that's the golden egg that we need to get to.
Yeah, that's a very challenging one. Darren, can perhaps you take the next question so we can... Sarah, I know you had a question, was that correct? So can we perhaps get a microphone here? We'll have this one, then we've got Adam Beck. And there's one down here too. So I might take those three questions. So yes, sir, could you direct it to Darren, please?
Yep. So I was actually going to ask you a question about Flinders. What learnings that you've taken from the Gold Coast experience in terms of connectivity and a forward-thinking sort of community? Because I understand Logan was built sort of on the fly, so to speak, whereas you've had more time to sort of think about the construct of a smart city or a city of the future and the way that it connects. But what kind of investment have you made to go that way, the way of Springfield Lakes, for example, which is all-encompassing smart city of the future, and an example to the world of how a smart city, a master plan community can be built?
Yeah, well, 10 years later, it's just a completely different, technological environment. There's just so much on offer at, more affordable prices. So the principles are still there. I mean, in terms of, challenges for body corporate management, for example, and using electronic means for everything from running body corporates through to electronic conveyancing, which is completely possible now through the federal government systems. So, I think environmentally there are a lot more options now to monitor things like water quality in our parks and lakes. Security is far more advanced. So it really just shows you how far technology has come in the last 10 years. And now it's about really applying that in practical ways.
Thank you. So, Adam, perhaps, and just one person to answer the question, just so we can get through a few more.
Oh, I wanted to comment from all of them, but okay, one's
Come on,
fine.
Adam.
So, so you're at a dinner date with the Federal Minister for Cities and Digital Transformation, Angus Taylor. He grants you one wish. What is your response?
Okay, if it's one sentence from each of you, I'm happy with
one
all
sentence
three.
for each. He grants
Okay,
you one
that's
wish.
fair
What's
enough.
your response?
I'll grant that wish as well.
Full support for the suite of smart community initiatives that we're about to implement.
Yes.
More co-funding, more of these programs that don't have, such specific criteria to, restrict the co-funding opportunities. 50-50 co-funding goes a long way towards making it viable.
Less intergovernmental bickering. Just get it done. Forget the politics. Get it done.
Great question, great answers. I hope people tweeted that. I've got one question down here, and then one here, and then I think we'll have to wrap that one up. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. I have a request for you for a vision for innovative workplaces. Is that fair to request of you? So my biggest community is where I spend most of my waking hours, which happens to be at work. So when you say community, sometimes I think workplace. Is that okay? All right. So my question's around the workplace. And from what you see of the future, say this building right here, right now, it's pretty typical, I think, for a workplace. In the future, what would this space look like to help inspire innovation in my work as a knowledge worker? Do you have a vision for that?
Sorry, I'm always going for the microphone. Sorry, guys. Look, I think there's been tremendous movement in the last 40, 50 years. It used to be cubicles. Everyone had cubicles, windows, glass doors, all that. Now it's going to co-working spaces, open space like this. You can imagine 40, 50 people working in 20 different industries in a space like this, movement, noise. Through osmosis, you hear things, you learn things, you're improving your own business. And it's going to go more towards that. You're going to be doing the same in a park. Or, you're going to have that technology at your hand or somewhere at a cafe or somewhere like that. So I think your working spaces are going to be less bound, less defined, and they're going to be everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. And connectivity, as I mentioned before, is the absolute key. I mean, I anchor myself out of a 20 square metre co-working space on the Gold Coast, but our headquarters is at Barangaroo in Sydney. But if you look at that, it's just like a big co-working space. So I think we're already seeing great design, great connectivity, and some organisations really embracing it. No matter, it's a cultural change. It doesn't matter where you work, but you need to be connected. So I think that'll change the built form definitely.
Absolutely. Remote working and smart working is a big part of the future. Yes, ma'am, last question. Thank you so much.
G'day, my name's Laurie Karansky. I'm actually the councillor for Division 4, which is where we have Yarra Bilba, and I'm very excited that we're working collaboratively in this space, and I think we're really kicking some goals working with community. But my question actually relates to when we look back at Logan in the 80s and Logan Central and the emergence of that area, I think that we've learned a lot as communities. So looking forward to the end of your projects in years to come, my question is, what legacy do you want to leave behind where people go, that was great for you having been here?
Well, I think the legacy comes down to community and family, doesn't it? That's what really drives us as what gets us out of bed in the morning, and making sure that we're creating spaces that centre around, community and family. So that would be my answer.
Good answer. I don't know. I'd add to that. It's best place, isn't it? It's about the quality of the place. And to me, if it's Flinders, Flagstone, Yarra Bilba, they're all great places that connect and talk to each other, and people go, we really want to be here. That's the legacy.
And I think, 20 seconds. If we think about developers historically, they were the town founders. They had the bust in the middle of the town square, and they were fairly noble people, noble profession. But fair to say, over time, there's, same as everyone else, every other profession, that the minorities ruin it for the majority. But there are many developers out there that are creating great outcomes, and I think they have to, because if they don't, people go elsewhere. So I think I absolutely agree with what the fellas are saying there. It is about community. It's about creating better outcomes. And what do they say about a citizen of a city? To leave the city in a better place than what you found it. I think that's also what developers do, or have to do, is to leave a city in a better place than what they found it. And that's why we have an opportunity, because we've got greenfield. We don't have all the challenges of having something that's already set. You can create that.
Well, that was another amazing session. And ladies and gentlemen, can you please thank the panellists? Steve Harrison, Peter Cummins and Darren McLean, thank you so much. Wonderful.